Okay, everybody, it's 10 a.m. I want to go ahead and remind you there is a link in the chat box over on the side for you to be able to access captioning. I will continue to put that link in the chat box throughout this presentation so that you are able to access that if you come in late. I would like to welcome everybody. You're attending the Check and Connect with Indiana Vocational Rehabilitation Services, a webinar series for Indiana Community Employment Program Managers and Provider Agencies CEOs. I'm Kelly Land, Project Coordinator for the Center on Community Living and Careers. Please use the chat box on the side to ask questions throughout the presentation. Questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. If anyone has any connectivity problems, use the chat box to indicate. There are also several downloadable files, and that is in the middle box on the side. It also includes today's PowerPoint and the VRS manual. Now,
okay, good morning. Sycamore Services, we cover all of Marion County, the surrounding counties, including Hendricks and Morgan, Vanderburgh down in the Evansville area, and we have begun providing services in the Muncie area too. We have on staff 19 employment consultants. So we've been heavily involved in discovery this past year. Carla?
Carla Orr, Adult and Child Health Center has a job links program that works in Marion County and the surrounding 8 counties. And we work primarily with about 50% of our caseload is direct vocational rehabilitation referrals, and the other half, of course, is through our internal mental health center.
Great. And my name is Maya Cox, and I'm also with the CCLC, and I am the technical assistance contact for both Adult and Child and Sycamore Services. They are participating in the VR-funded technical assistance project, and they're both model sites. And so we've been all working together this past, 8 months trying to figure out what works for folks. So we wanted to go ahead and get started and talk about how Adult and Child and Sycamore have both found some promising practices and how to maximize the employment services model. And so this slide is just kind of like a summary of what we're going to go over today. But what we found is that folks are successful when you can maximize the time spent in billable activities and reduce time in non-billable activities. So that means that for the employment specialists, we try to free up their schedules as much as possible so that they can spend time doing billable service. And all of those administrative tasks that you can't bill for, we try to shift those and make them as easy as possible. We also try to make sure that job seekers are receiving adequate services. This model was created because sometimes folks didn't get the services that they needed, or that sometimes folks may be incentivized to work with people who needed less help. And this model is great because you get whatever you need. And so as we shift and learn the new model, we have to make sure that we're taking full advantage of all of those new services. And that being said, we have to make sure that you guys bill for all those great services that you're providing. A lot of times folks do things for free, and I know that everybody does it, but we want to minimize that as much as possible, and we want to maximize the revenue that you bring in. We've also found that using data to make decisions has been very helpful in making good choices, both for consumers and making sure that you guys get paid. And of course, this isn't the first time you've heard it, but in this model we have found that good communication is critical, and that means good communication with VR staff as well as with job seekers. It's critical in this model. Okay, so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Debbie, who's going to talk about reducing administrative barriers and how they do that at Sycamore Services.
Okay.
Debbie, this is Kelly. Can we hold real quick? Captioning is still not working. Maya, I apologize. We cannot hear you again.
Can you hear now?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, it's started to say our employment services coordinator is our single point of contact. So I guess as far as the bullets go, probably about 2 months ago, with the help of Maya and Kelly, we were able to start receiving our authorizations from VR in PDF form so that they could be automatically uploaded in our system. Prior to that, our coordinator was entering everything in herself. So this has been a big savings of time. So that's occurring. But then what we do is that all of our staff, all of our employment consultants send all of their documentation into the office to the coordinator. That would be the ESRPs, the discovery profiles, and they run their own case notes and send all of those in to the coordinator. This allows her to really look over them for accuracy and to make sure we're covering everything. And for ongoing training, too, it's let us know where we need to sit down with staff and go over things. So they come in, those things get sent into her. Now, after she reviews everything, those are sent over to our accounting department so that we can invoice. Referrals also get emailed to our coordinator. She enters those into our system, reviews those, and then those come to me. I then make case assignments. So I do that. Of course, when staff complete their ESRPs, they're also asking for authorizations from that method. But if they need more hours during the month, they will request those directly. But then our administrative, my coordinator, and myself also will follow up to make sure those are received. To assist with that, our administrative assistant actually sends out a report to all the employment consultants every Monday. It gives all of their caseload, and it shows their authorizations, the beginning and end date, how many hours they've used, and how many are left. That allows them the opportunity to get ahead of things and make sure they're requesting authorizations timely. So right now, that's worked pretty well for us.
Adult and child has taken a little bit of a slower, I think, approach to these things. However, I was real excited to have a customer service person, a part-time position, hired to assist with all our billing and invoicing in February of this year. So once that happened, it really reduced a huge administrative burden because previously, for the first 7 months of the new model, I was doing all that, and I'm sure you guys have done it too, and it's kind of a nightmare. It's really difficult. So that was huge. So I have a part-time staff, 20 hours a week, that's solely devoted and designated to do all the job links billing, follow up on unpaid invoices, create all the invoices, just pretty much our checks and balance as far as payment goes. We have always, we kind of came out of the gate running with a centralized mailbox. So we have one that's job links billing, is what we call it. And vocational rehabilitation staff send any new authorizations and any new referrals directly to that mailbox. As far as streamlining that process, it then goes to our associate team lead, Jane, and what Jane does is if it's a new referral, she will then complete case assignment and get them briefed on it and going so that there's no delay in services once we get the referral. She also will make note of any newer, updated, or extended authorization and forward those to the employment counselors. Just within the last 3 weeks, I was designated a percentage of time of an existing care coordinator who works at our office, and the care coordinator's role was pretty much entering services, whether it's DCS, DMHA, a package through an ANSA or a package through a different insurance provider. So what is so exciting for me is that VR is recognized as important enough now at our agency to have designated a percentage of that person's staff. And now instead of for the last year and several months, year and 4 months, how far are we into it? I had been entering those authorizations into the electronic medical health records, and now I have someone doing that for us. What that allows her to do is go one step further and enter into the electronic medical health record the authorization number, and that it's a pre-approved service that's to be delivered and paid. So it kind of times it out. And in our EMR, I previously could not run any reports about how much time do we have left. Are we running out of time? Are we running out of units? And we would go over or not hit or not even enter it correctly, right? So we can now run a weekly report. And I also just got an office coordinator person, like kind of an office support help, and she's going to run those reports for me so that I don't need to do that, which would be an additional burden or barrier as listed. So, yeah, I think that's it. Oh, the very last thing, our associate team lead will, since they eliminated the sending of the DP every month with the invoice, which was a huge administrative burden and really held up billing, I think, now we can do those monthly reports. And what we're going to try and do per VR's vocational rehabilitation's request in one of our heavy hit areas is they want to get those prior to month's end. And I'm going to have the associate team lead of our Job Links program kind of do a review on all those and you know, check off that there's been some supervision, and then she's going to punt it to me if there needs to be some mentoring and guidance in that area. That's it. Is this you or me? Oh, technology. Okay, so one thing Adult and Child has always been extremely supportive of since the new employment service model and really prior is that each staff has a laptop, has Wi-Fi access. There's really no connectivity issues. We could meet at a Starbucks and get online and do job searches or do a typing test with an individual or whatever, which is really, really nice being so field-based. They also would use they can access the electronic medical health records from that as well, so we can concurrently document and do some collaborative documentation, which really it brings the individual even more so into it and allows them to understand what's going on. And it reduces the burden of documenting and doing things later.
Yes, at Sycamore we also provide computers, notebooks, and jetpacks to our staff because they are in the field. So they are able to, everything is electronic now, so they can access case files. They're able to enter time throughout the day, update their case notes, work on a profile if needed, so that we have accurate reporting on our authorizations, and they're able to capture everything they need to. So this, when our admin does the weekly productivity, it's really important that everybody has been able to get time entered. When they enter their time, they're also putting in their case notes. That documentation that they're doing is actually billable. So if it's a case note for a discovery person, then they're able to bill for that time. So that's kind of an important thing to capture more, billable time for your staff. So, yeah.
And so I do want to say that both Carla and Debbie's groups are using software that captures the case notes that puts out reports. So they're both getting these authorization reports as a result of the case notes and the data that their ECs are entering. And so do you guys want to talk a little bit about the different ways you use your reports or the data that you take?
I use it to make sure caseloads are appropriate and effective. I also will look at folks that I know are really, really busy, and I see them being busy, and I don't see that reflected on their daily report sheets and the amount of services that may or may not be entered. And what has been real effective this last year has been sitting down with them and trying to help them understand all the different things that really are quite appropriate to be placed within a discovery service or within a job readiness service or within a supported employment if it's a job coaching service. So that has been helpful, and it has helped to drive a lot of discussion and a lot of growth. And I think people are really starting to understand what they're doing is important, and all their services need to be tracked.
So you were able to use data to pick up on services that you potentially weren't billing for that you could be billing for?
I sure was.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Which is great. Which is great.
We do the same thing. It's easy when you have the reports to be able to look and make sure that every person is being served appropriately, and as Carla said, just to ensure that how much time is needed right now for our staff to be doing those one-on-one services, just to have an idea of when do we need to add people or to reduce a caseload for that reason. We also ensure by looking at the reports that the employment staff have coded things correctly, because that can be a problem with the billing, to not be able to, mistakes can cost you money. So we do have that quality assurance piece in there too.
And then if we go backwards in the presentation, we can see that example, I think, of a report.
Yeah, this is a similar report that at Sycamore that our staff get every Monday, showing where things ended at weekend. So you can see it gives the of course, gives the person's name, the EC, the VRC who's made the authorizations, the type of authorization, how many hours have been authorized, and where we're at each month. If an authorization period is timed out, that's going to show up in red, so they can immediately see there's a problem. They need to follow through with the counselor to ask for a new authorization. If you look under someone with a milestone 1, it's showing the hours used. So that's a good way to monitor how much time each person has been spending in job development for that particular person.
Okay, different kinds of supervision. I think we've already hit on a lot of these, but again, we will identify needs that folks have and address them as needed. We'll definitely refer to the VR manual when possible to help lay it out, but man, I've given that to my staff repeatedly, and some of them just don't get it from reading it. So what I'll do is pull that out and apply it to the situation and kind of go through this scenario with them, and that seems to really be helpful, which is why I think the boots on the ground training is so effective and so imperative. Again, reviewing the documentation that goes to VR, I think Debbie's got that under control. I'll let her talk about that. I don't do that.
Right, and I just wanted to talk about the mentorship piece. We are looking right now at having probably 2 lead positions in the field where the person can carry a caseload but have some administrative time also to be able to mentor staff in the field. I don't have time to do that, so that kind of leaves them out there sometimes where they could use some coaching. So we're looking at trying to implement that by the beginning of the year. I think at Sycamore we try to have our weekly staff meetings. We have a quarterly meeting with everybody where we can go over training. I think I'm just now, after all this time, I think it's been just difficult for staff to learn all the pieces. And I think it's because sometimes there's a period of time before something that they maybe have a milestone billing, so they have to refresh their minds because they've been busy doing discovery. So I think it's just an ongoing discussion and training, and like Carla said, I make sure they have the updated manual, and we go through that during meetings, when things come up.
Okay. So the next slide is a case example, and I'm going to kind of just talk about this a little bit. It is one particular way where a person with a mental health disorder and illness really has benefited from this model. So she was long-time case, right? It's her 6th vocational rehabilitation case. We have worked with her before. She had a plan for employment and supports done in April of 2015. And of course, hours and hours and hours of work, went into working with her and trying to get to the next outcome, right? And then the model came around and changed. And I had an individual who was the employment counselor with this woman, and she did a real good job of asking for discovery as soon as the model was in place, and started working through the discovery services to identify some specific targeted actions, ideas, interests, her skill sets, because this is her 6th case, right? And she definitely has some substantial barriers as far as her mental health. So she did get placed. She got a job at Xerox, and she worked there 10 days. So we did get paid milestone 1 under the new model. So that $1,300 was paid out. On day 10, she no longer worked there. She stopped. So what was really impressive about this particular situation and how my employment counselor was able to work with vocational rehabilitation is she went right back into discovery, and so they worked again through several issues, and instead of having a huge lull of services or trying to identify what was wrong, what was not good, it was a more strengths-based approach. So they worked together. She got some job search placement and assistance and SE hourly from then out to get back to another job, which she did start working, and now she's really impressed and she's very happy with the job she got in, I think, January or February. And the employment staff, now she's working at, I think, Lowe's call center. So she loves it. Of course, she's one of those individuals who is high functioning enough. Oh, and keep in mind, this was a tier 2 person. So we only got $500 for like a year's worth of work before we started getting some reimbursement through discovery and that first milestone. So that was kind of nice. So back to the Lowe's. She loves Lowe's. And after a very long period of time of her being there and struggling, the employment counselor has been able to do a lot off-site via the phone and phone conferences with the boss. And now the individual that's employed there, Letitia, is allowing her to come on site and help her even more. She loves the job. She even says she's a little bored, but now they're doing all kinds of med changes because of her schedule variance. So she's far from stable, but she's really been more successful than I think she has in any of the other jobs, especially the ones that we've helped her with, because I think this is her 6th case, but this is the 2nd or 3rd time we've worked with her. So that's Letitia. Job search.
That'd be me. Okay, this next section's on job search assistance or job placement assistance, requesting hours for that. And if this is taken from the VR guide, pages 17 and 18, if you want to refer to that. This is kind of straight from that, from the guide. It can be authorized when milestone 1 may not be necessary. Individuals requiring minimal assistance with obtaining employment who may not need milestones. Sometimes milestone 1 may not be enough. MBR may supplement milestone 1 with hourly job search if appropriate and necessary for the consumer, or if a consumer experiences a job loss prior to retention and that person needs minimal assistance in securing another job. This is kind of the way we're following it. We're using when job development kind of reaches that 31 hours, because that's what milestone 1 equals if you divide it out by the $42 an hour. I'm not saying it's an automatic, but that's when that, as it says, it's a trigger for review. And we've started doing this. Normally it's been more hours in job development, but the key to this is that meaningful activity has occurred, that it's not just internet searches, that it's the employment consultant has really worked hard. They've involved the participant in the job search. Hopefully there have been interviews or things that can be shown. And all of this should be documented to you in a monthly email to the VR counselor. So when you are requesting job search assistance, they have that background as to what's happened. So we're kind of looking at this when it gets up there where we have done a lot of job development and for whatever reason it's not been successful. So we have started requesting authorizations for job search assistance so that our staff can bring in revenue for additional time. Another situation is when an individual has been placed and a job has been lost. And an example that we had, we got an individual, and actually he was not forthcoming with his background, but we discovered it. He was an ex-felon. Our employment consultant was able to place him, but he was SD, so the employment consultant did go in quite a bit for him anyway, because he just felt a responsibility to the employer because he had a connection there. And our person subsequently lost the job. One of the things was he would not stay off his cell phone. Instead of working, he was busy calling people and checking messages. He was written up, he was given warnings, and then he lost the job. So rather than going forward with another milestone 1 because VR wanted to give him another chance, and typically we don't stop working with folks. We continue on. But we thought to make this worthwhile for the EC, we would ask for job search assistance, and we've received it. So the key, though, if you get those hours, is to document carefully and be very mindful of making sure that everything that you're doing is quality.
Oh, sorry, I'm trying to find the button.
It's on there.
I see it. I can't get it. Oh, thanks. Okay, so job readiness training. We have had some success in developing job readiness plans that have been accepted by the vocational rehabilitation counselors, and it has helped drive a really effective way to work with people and keep them engaged while you're looking and getting them ready for what employment goals they might have. So the purpose, the individual just would, if they want to come and talk through it with me to get some ideas, I do that on an ongoing basis, but mostly if they can identify the purpose, like what's needed, and it's specific, and then they also look at it, how are we going to meet this, and what are the expected outcomes. The documentation requirements is that you get it done and you get it to them. Our experience has been that we do that first and then we get the authorization. It does say here that it should be completed within 2 weeks of the authorization, but we don't get a lot of job readiness training authorizations unless we ask for them. So my advice to your staff, if they're not using this, I guess if they want it, they better ask for it, because we're not getting those authorizations up front. That's just my advice on that. So here's an example, Mike. I believe that Maya has the actual plan for you to access and check out, but I'll just give you a quick update. It's his third case with VR, and I think we've had him I don't know if we've had him the other previous 2 times, but I know we had him before. He's been open a good long time with us. He is in and out of housing, usually out. He has an anxiety disorder. He's very slow intellectually. I believe his IQ is 65. Unless I'm confusing that with Tao, who's the next example. And he has a speech impediment, so he's very reliant on any communication with any potential employers, it be with us. So we kind of work through that. His plan, when you get a chance to check that out, is very specific to one particular area. He just would not clean himself. He's culturally and consistently, he's got just the homeless look. His hygiene's a significant barrier, and what happened is, after a long time, we started working with him more closely, and while we asked repeatedly for discovery hours that were declined, we were able to identify this hygiene issue and finally devised a plan to address that in a very step-by-step, broken down, simple manner, and that was proved, lo and behold. So that was real exciting. He is, a little bit older than me, so he's probably in his 50s. So if you can imagine talking about picking up this bar of soap with someone that age, it was a real struggle, but we probably got 20 to 40 hours of job readiness training to work on just those very simple steps. What's the most exciting piece of that is that we were then, after that happened, authorized some discovery to actually address some of his interests as far as job shadowing efforts to get him out, and he was presentable and more comfortable. It just did so much for his self-esteem to be more appropriate, I guess, in the business world. Because if you can imagine, he wasn't even allowed to volunteer anymore at Second Helpings because they said he just needed to clean up. So since then, it's been kind of a good thing. My next example, okay, Tao. So this is another guy who's homeless when we got him in December. Well, we started working with him in October. He was authorized in December, severely depressed, and he's really low functioning intellectually too. And like I said, I can't remember his IQ, but borderline illiterate. What we were able to do with him was a much more in-depth and comprehensive. The employment staff really embraced a lot of different areas that she was going to work with him step by step and help him to become more independent and more ready for work. It was very different from discovery, and she was able to identify it and target each different area and assess a timeline. So memory and organizational and cognitive function, huge. Missed appointments, shows up an hour early, just hangs out at our office. We'll see whoever comes down and talks to him, those kinds of things. Again, self-care, diet, hygiene, healthcare needs, self-advocacy, utilizing supports, articulating needs, desires, and opinions. She was able to write up a job readiness skill as far as email and basic keyboarding and internet skills. So, and you can read in depth kind of how that looked. And I don't know if every job readiness training will be approved around that, but for him it was definitely something he needed to be more work ready. He did appreciate all the help. So typically we've worked with Tal before, and he comes in homeless, doesn't have a place to live, doesn't have anything, and just wants a job, right? So we start working with him and we help him get a job, and he keeps it for a while, and we might even get a successful closure, and then something happens and he's still homeless. Well, in this particular case, using the discovery we got in December, she was able to work real closely with him to find out what his barriers were around that, and to find out and address those through discovery and through a lot of time spent up front with him. And he did get housing, and he did get insurance, and he did get into some programming. And we didn't lose him because we didn't help him get that quick survival job, which was a unique situation, because you may tend to lose your homeless or mental health clients because they've got that immediate need, that they need that fix right away. They need to get some money. So she really capitalized on the amount of energy she was able to put towards him, and kept him engaged, and has kept him engaged. And once he got housed, he was more stable, and he was able to address all those 4 areas that she targeted on the job readiness training plan. And money wasn't, of course he still wants money, he still wants to work, but it wasn't the sense of urgency. So she's been able to help him progress, and he's doing some work experiences right now, and quite successful.
And I want to just let you guys know that both job readiness training plans that Carla is referring to are available for download in the pod to the right of the PowerPoint screen, as well as the chart that Debbie shared with you that outlines like the authorization report.
Okay, so supported employment and on-the-job support short-term. So we know that when someone becomes employed, milestone 2 is paid at 4 weeks. So approximately a couple weeks before that, staff should prepare the ESRP, and that's where you will ask for SE hours. We are expected to do about 45 hours now with the increase in the rate. 45 hours of support up to milestone 2. If somebody needs more hours of support than that, you can ask for SE hours early. And we've actually done that. We had someone who is working full-time, MSD, but working full-time. So we were able to get SE supports, and at that time it was about 30 hours, I believe, under the old rate. So we were able to do that early. So as this chart says, then you've got to remember that once you complete milestone 2, that does not necessarily trigger milestone 3, because a person can be in SE support for up to 24 months. So milestone 3 is only after stabilization. That's when we start counting that down. Okay.
Hey, Debbie, I apologize. Can you repeat a little bit of that? The sound went in and out, and we couldn't hear exactly what you said about the milestone 2 hours.
Okay, we're going to go back to that. Yes, it's just that milestone 2, you're funded from that milestone 2 payment. The expectation is that that will provide about 45 hours of support. If someone needs more than 45 hours of support in those first 4 weeks, you can request the SE support hours early. Yeah. And as this slide says, under supported employment, VR supports the assumption that people with MSD labels will likely need supported employment. And the whole point is, I think, from what I've understood, just in discussion with other providers, we've all got to remember that we're not supposed to rush to stabilization. We can keep individuals, the case open and provide these supports to them as we just set up to 24 months. You should always try to submit the ESRP 2 weeks after someone has started working instead of 4, so that you can be ready with an authorization at 4 weeks. You've got to give our VR counselors a little time. Okay, so here's an example. Kevin, 23 years old. He's been diagnosed with specific learning disability and ADHD. When we got his case, Kevin and his parents shared with us that, well, I'll tell you, we got Kevin under RBF, and there were 3 different PES plans with that referral, and I really thought, oh my goodness, how can we make a difference here? We're the 4th provider. So, but Kevin had gotten 1 previous job, and he says he lost the job because he wasn't provided enough supports. So we were able to get him placed as a porter at a restaurant in December of 2015, working 20 hours a week. Because of Kevin's diagnosis, his family has attempted it, but he is not going to be eligible for extended services. Kevin gets frustrated over his coworkers. He kind of pays too much attention to what he feels they're not doing right. This causes him anxiety, and that's really the target area that we have been supporting him at. So as you can see from the chart, we are starting to trend down, hoping to get him stabilized soon. But we want to make sure, because he does not, he's not going to get extended services, we don't want to leave him too soon. We want to use this new service model and keep him open to benefit him. Another example is Andrew. Andrew has a mood disorder, and he is on this. He has Asperger's syndrome. He had 3 previous jobs that just didn't last for him. So we did some discovery. The employment consultant found a work experience for him. He did very well at it, so this turned into a no-Joe, and he is working for 20 hours a week. Andrew has a very narrow viewpoint of how people should act, and it really disturbs him if he views coworkers or customers who are not behaving the way he feels they should, and it causes him a lot of frustration. Andrew does have a behavior specialist. He is already on a waiver, so our employment consultant has worked with his behavior specialist to assist him, but he's working with just helping him from what he's learned from the behavior specialist to encourage him on his coping strategies on the job. So kind of, as you can see from the diagram, we're a little spike up, but we're progressing towards stabilization. The last example is Larry. Larry came to us straight out of high school. He's 19 years old. His employment consultant got a work experience for him at a local grocery store. After completing that, he was offered a job. This is his very first job. So Larry, he's a great kid, but he's really social. He likes to, I went through his line once just to, incognito to see how he was doing, and my goodness, he was just talking on all kinds of subjects. So his employment consultant was really working with him on staying on task, appropriate greetings, and knowing when to end a conversation with colleagues and customers. He did really well, though, so he did reach stabilization, and he went right into extended services.
So I guess, does anybody have any questions?
So Kelly, I'm not sure if people have asked questions.
Yes,
Great.
several questions. The first questions are actually going back to technology. And the one question is, could you talk a little bit more about the jetpacks that you use?
Yes, it's just a very small device that our staff they're able to access, get on the internet without having to hook into a Wi-Fi at a business. So wherever they go to at the person's home or just wherever they're able to get online.
So it's like a mobile internet kind of thing?
Right.
Okay.
Like a MiFi.
Okay.
You've heard of a MiFi?
Yeah, and just to add to that, usually that's through your phone carrier, and you can just pay like a monthly rate for that as well. The next question is, what is the name of the software package you are using?
Okay, at Sycamore we're using, it's called Excel.
Carla, what do you guys use?
We don't have a package. We have electronic medical health records, and it is a system called Profiler currently. Next year we should get a new one, but right now we're an EMR.
So Carla's is a little bit different because you guys are using what adult and child as a provider uses, so yours looks a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just add to that, the Excel that Debbie is talking about is ACCEL. It's Excel Consulting. A lot of people get that confused with Excel, the actual tracking EXCEL.
The Microsoft product. Okay.
The next one that I think we can answer this one pretty easily, but it's the name of the software you are using to run reports. And I know for Debbie's program, it's the same program through Excel. And then, Carla, if you'd like to answer what you guys.
What I will ask my person who's in charge of the Profiler EMR system to just create a report for me. And there's already one in there to assess units and days left of an authorized service because that's what they use for all the other services. So I would just select my cost center. I mean, not my cost center, my funding source, which would be SE.
So most providers that I think we've worked with that have software systems, whether it's electronic medical records or a specific software system built for more like Medicaid services, usually there's a report functionality to it. That's kind of why you're entering all your data into there so that you can spit out data. For folks who don't have software systems, we have often used Excel, the Microsoft product, to develop tracking sheets. So if someone doesn't have access to the software or something that can kind of aggregate case notes and that kind of thing, please contact us afterwards, and we're happy to share with you a sample of what some of those Microsoft Excel tracking sheets look like.
Wonderful. You can get most of our emails off the CCLC website as well, and we will put that in the chat box.
Actually, we have them at the last slide. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Well, there you go. The next question is, I think we got a little echoing, Maya.
Okay, let me mute it while you talk then.
The next question is, do you also keep track of your facility private transportation with this as well?
What we currently do is, no, it's separate. It's not a simple process. We have to do our mileage reimbursement on a mileage reimbursement form. And what I do is, after I approve those for reimbursement, because we reimburse at a 52-cent per mile rate, so I turn all that in and they get paid, and then I have to make copies of that and send it to my 20-hour-a-week customer accounts person, and then she gets the 38, 36, whatever it is, cents per mile, and she has to manually enter those on all the invoices. But heck, I appreciate it. It was a nightmare to do. But until we have a system, we can't do that in EMR. So that's just the way we have to do it, or we have to not collect anything. And I'd rather go through the extra steps personally.
And at Sycamore, with the Excel system, when staff enter their time and case notes, they also enter their mileage. So that's how they can get reimbursed. For the mileage that we can bill VR for traveling to a discovery activity, they put those miles under that entry, and then we can run a report so that we can have everything right there to bill VR. So it works out really well.
Great, thank you. The next question, it talks a little bit about non-billable hours. So when you guys answer this, I'd like to kind of talk about what is billable and what's not through the new ESM system, or the new employment services model. It says, how do you balance productivity when you have so much non-billable activity? And this is followed up from when we talked about weekly meetings with clients.
At our agency, because of the huge fiscal hit we have incurred this last year, we realigned the standards with which an employment counselor needs to meet. So there's a certain percentage of time that's required for it to be a service delivery. We're redefining it. We're not calling it productivity. We're not calling it revenue. We're calling it service delivery, because there is so much that we do that is a non-revenue generating service. But of the 14 staff I have, 11 of them are old school, so they identify very strongly with a dollar amount applied to their worth. So at our agency, it's just restructuring. I'm just every time they say, what's my productivity, or I just build an outcome, it's like service delivery, what did you do? And they get credit for it, because I don't want them to not do it because it's not a revenue generating service. There's so much we have to do, and if we didn't get credit for our non-revenue generating code, we wouldn't provide it. And then who loses? The individual who's not getting any funding for the services we're supposed to be providing, right?
And we look at it, I guess we could call it productive time rather than a productivity level, because almost everything they're doing is productive. If they're working in job development to a milestone, that's productive, even though it's not an hourly billing at that point. So rather than, except for a staff meeting or some trainings, everything is productive.
And what I'd like to add is that the CCLC has developed a billing fact sheet. If Kelly or Jackie, if somebody could put in the chat box the link to our blog, there is a whole blog entry about the fact sheet and billable services, and this all comes straight out of the Employment Services Manual. We didn't create anything. We just shot it out in a fact sheet so it's a little easier to digest. But just as they've been talking about, you have to be aware of what services are quote-unquote billable or what I guess is productive as far as time goes. There are oftentimes things that folks aren't aware of that you could bill for. Sometimes things like consumer-specific documentation might get dropped from the mix, and that could be a huge source of revenue when you have a lot of employment specialists. Sometimes folks don't realize that the time you spend developing a situational assessment or a job shadow or an internship, that time is also, billable or productive time. So it's making sure that you're aware of what does count. And the other piece would be also what Debbie talked about earlier, that they are tracking time spent under milestones so that when they have spent enough time that they have run out of the dollars or the funding, that they are asking for additional authorizations to cover their cost.
Great, thank you. And I did put the
Thanks,
Shared
Kelly.
Solutions
So
blog.
the link to our blog, Shared Solutions, is now in the chat box, and so you can subscribe to the blog, and you can also just visit to see all the previous posts there. But there is a post on billing that you.
Maya, I'm going to move on to the next question. I just wanted to let you know your guys' audio is a little spotty, so we might have some issues on this next question. But for employment services coordinator positions, are any aspects of their task billable activities, or are their positions completely unfunded? Okay, everybody, it looks like we'll just have to answer these questions in a follow-up. We do thank you so much, and I apologize for the sound difficulty. We'd love to hear any additional questions, and as Maya said, the last slide on here has all of our email address as well, and we will follow up. Like I said, we only had 2 questions left. We will follow up on those questions and have them available to you. We hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you.